they're not attached to any document, and they were not filed at all with the Department of Civil Rights in the state of California. Screenshots and photos are stored in iCloud.
Brian Friedman just exposed Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds after their conveniently deleted evidence got fully restored and thrown back in their faces.
Had she disclosed those in August, Stephanie would be violating her confidentiality agreement with her and Wayfair, who was her client at the time.
They really thought wiping messages and tampering with screenshots would survive a legal audit in 2025 now. The same proof they tried to bury is the exact thing that's about to bury them.
And it's just odd because the 99.9% of these documents and these text messages are in this data form that are extracted from SEO-ready, which is a data extractor forensic tool.
Blake Lively thought she could play the press like a piano, and for a while it worked. In December, she quietly slipped a batch of so-called evidence to top media outlets like the LA Times and New York Times.
Back in December, Blake sent out a press pack to different media outlets and provided them an attachment of screenshots that were never actually submitted to the CRD.
Weren't just any screenshots. They were carefully selected text messages cropped and curated to frame her as a victim. Headlines were written. Sympathy was stirred. The story was that Blake had been targeted, harassed, and unfairly dragged through the mud. But here's the twist. Not a single one of those screenshots made it into her actual legal complaint, not one.
If I told you that in December, the LA Times published with an attachment an exhibit that included pages of text messages that are not a part of her complaint today, Blake's complaint.
Why would someone hand over screenshots to the press but not submit them in court? Simple, because in court there are rules. Evidence has to be verified, filed, and cross-examined.
And also go as far back as May of 2024. And what if I told you that none of those text messages were actually in the CRD complaint, nor were they filed with the CRD?
But in the media, it just needs to look convincing. That's what Blake counted on. Her press pack wasn't about proving a case. It was about controlling the story. And for a hot minute, she pulled it off until the lawyers got involved.
And yet, some of these text messages also refute many of her claims about a smear campaign.
That's when Brian Friedman stepped in and tore the whole thing apart. His team ran the receipts. They reviewed every document submitted to the California Department of Civil Rights. And surprise, those screenshots nowhere to be found. They weren't part of her complaint. They weren't attached to any official exhibit.
The reason why Justin Baldoni and Wayfair are so confident in their case is because they know that no smear campaign happened.
They were floating in the wind used to sway public opinion, but deliberately kept out of the legal process. That move alone raised eyebrows across the courtroom. But the real bombshell, the screenshots weren't extracted using proper forensic tools. They came straight from someone else's iCloud.
Well, I told you that I spoke to an insider, and I've also talked to people that know Justin, and I've spoken to people connected to the film, and it's a factual reality.
Friedman didn't hold back. He labeled the entire press leak a manipulated PR stunt, one that tried to weaponize private messages outside the eyes of the court. And here's where it gets darker. These weren't Blake's own texts. Many of them were lifted from Jen Abel's iCloud account. That's not just shady, that's illegal.
That there was no smear campaign because there was only a very short time and window that the smear campaign could have ever even taken place because Blake decided it was a smear campaign.
If someone pulls your private messages out of your cloud account without permission and hands them to a third party, that's a breach, and Blake's team had no right to those files, especially not after Jen had already left the company. SILP 11. It's not just about the breach, it's about what they chose to include. Blake's team cherry-picked messages that made her look sympathetic, but conveniently left out the parts that showed she was making threats behind the scenes. One message about blocking Justin Baldoni.
Was already gunning for that narrative of it being retaliation on day one. Any negative feedback she got, she was going to blame a smear campaign.
Another where Blake allegedly threatened to withhold her contract. If she didn't get her way, none of that made it into the press drops. They only leaked the drama that painted her as the underdog.
Because of the retaliation clause that she put in her 17-point agreement, which meant that she would be able to sue Justin Baldoni.
What makes it worse is how deliberate it was. These weren't random leaks. The LA Times ran pieces quoting these messages as if they were officially part of the legal filings. They weren't. The NT did the same, but when court documents were reviewed, when the actual filings were released, those texts vanished. It was a shell game. And they were not filed at all with the Department of Civil Rights in the state of California. I have a full FOIA request which gave me every single document from the CRD keep. The damaging ones buried elevate the victim narrative and let the headlines do the heavy lifting, but unfortunately for Blake, Friedman found the shells and is showing the court exactly what was under.
These exhibits that she provided, which do not qualify for privilege because they're not attached to any document.
Don't care about curated PR stories. They care about facts, dates, chains of custody, and Friedman's team was quick to point out that these screenshots didn't come from Cellbrite or any forensic extractor. They were raw and verified and pulled from private iCloud backups. That's how they caught the trail.
Not filed at all with the Department of Civil Rights in the state of California. I have a full FOIA request, which gave me every single document from the CRD.
Some of the screenshot had weird timestamps, like today at 12:06 p.m., which doesn't exist in static legal files. It only shows up when you take a screenshot in real time, which means whoever accessed them was actively inside the iCloud account, likely Jen Abels, at that exact moment.
I can tell you for a fact that these exhibits were never filed with the CRD.
So now the tables have turned. What was meant to be a quiet press advantage has become a legal liability. The court sees a difference between real evidence and media bait, and what Blake called her evidence now looks more like theft for Friedman's, making it clear this isn't just about missing paperwork. This is about digital intrusion, manipulated timelines, and a team that tried to spin the narrative outside the bounds of the law.
These were published by the LA Times, and they were also attached in the New York Times. And on the very first page of this.
And now that the deleted trail has been restored thanks to court-ordered access and subpoenaed metadata, there's no hiding anymore. Every message Blake's team tried to leak, redact, or bury is back. And this time it's going before a judge, not a headline.
A text message that she literally is ignoring and proves Ryan Reynolds' involvement. And it also proves why Mr. Baldoni, Justin, began documenting everything that was happening.
On May 17th, 2024, Ryan Reynolds blocked Justin Baldoni not after an alleged incident, not after a scandal, but while they were fighting over who got to control the final cut of a movie. That single digital move, unfollow, block, vanish wasn't personal. It was political. Internal messages confirmed this wasn't about misconduct.
I mean, they had been before, but they got even more into documentation of all communications because of what was happening and the threats that they were receiving.
It was about money, about marketing, about power, and above all, it was about Blake Lively's desperation to own the final edit of the film, an edit that frankly didn't land with test audience.
When they were fighting over the cut of the film, and Blake was fighting about editing,
in a thread dated May 17, Jen Ale messaged Justin with the words, "He blocked you as a 12-year-old girl." Her sarcasm was covering something real pure strategy. Jen went on to say, "This kind of behavior is ridiculous and part of the whole plan to keep chipping away at you because they know you will notice this kind of stuff and then likely acquiesce more to her demands."
And they were doing these screenings to see whose cut would be won and what audience liked better. Was it going to be Justin's cut or Blake's cut? And when she was making all of these threats about not putting Taylor Swift's song in the trailer, withholding signing her contract, arguing about, getting more time with an editor.
That's not a guess. That's from the very first text Blake's own team submitted in their so-called evidence bundle. And at date, it matches the same weekend tensions exploded behind the scenes over editing control.
We're trying to get more and more control over the film. And on May 17th, the very first text message of her exhibits, Jen Abel sends a text message to Justin Baldoni.
The real context came in between May 13th and May 20th. On May 13th, Sony and Wayfair conducted official audience testing of Justin Baldwin's version of the film. The response was overwhelming. According to internal reports, it scored 94%, with women under 35 and 74% of audiences said they would recommend.
We can put the plan down on paper and work with Jamie and Ashmi to make sure we have all the documentation needed of what happened on set, who witnessed what, and who would be allies to go on background if needed to shut down her claim.
Just 3 days later, on May 16th, the trailer was released publicly, and then on May 18th, Blake held a separate friends and family screening of her cut in New York. That version, she never shared audience feedback. The silence was telling.
May 17th, Ryan Reynolds blocked Justin Baldoni. Ryan blocked him, and it was because he was refusing to acquiesce to their demands. And those were threats coming up about what? We're going to go to who? The New York Times, and we're going to sue you for what? Sexual harassment? We're going to tell them what you did on the set?
By May 20th, things escalated. Blake threatened to pull back from promoting the film. She hinted she'd end Baldwin's career unless she got what she wanted. A second round of testing was done for both versions, and the results only made things worse for her. Blake's edit scored 82%, while Justin still held at 94%, whilst only 59% of respondents said they would recommend her version.
And perhaps people weren't even really paying attention because, I don't know, they just weren't paying attention. Why would he have blocked him? Well, because on May 13th, Sony and Wayfair, they did an official audience test score of his cut. He scored 94% with females under 35.
At that point, Ryan's May 17th block made perfect sense. He wasn't defending his wife's honor. He was protecting their investment. Whoever controlled the edit would control the story, the marketing, and the paycheck. This wasn't some emotional move. It was a business decision, the kind that usually happens in boardrooms, not DMs. Blake had ambitions for a directorial debut that failed, so she pivoted, pushing herself. As a producer, Ryan was already set to benefit if Blake got control of the marketing phase. And that's exactly what the block signaled: you're not part of our version.